Good day, and thank you for joining Civilnet today. In our office in person, not through Skype as usual, is Mr. Bedo Demirdjian. He's the Communications and Public Relations Officer at the European Armenian Federation for Justice and Democracy. Thank you for being here today.
It's a pleasure.
We're always contacting you every time there's a PACE session that's discussing anything Armenia related. Every time in Europe something's happening that's discussing Armenia, Nagorno-Karabakh. But we never discussed in full what the European Armenian Federation for Justice and Democracy stands for. What's the scope of the work you do? If you could just fill us in on the scope of your work.
Yes, sure. As you said, we are a federation. And we represent the Armenian national committees, the high-tide committees of Europe. And we are based in Brussels. And we do our advocacy work at the European institutions, European Parliament, European Council, European Commission. We also have the NATO headquarters in Brussels, and of course the Council of Europe in Strasbourg. Three different international organizations, and very relevant to Armenia and Armenians. So our office is based in Brussels. We work with these institutions, and in the meantime we coordinate the Armenian National Committees of Europe, their work, the political work within these institutions. So for example, just to say simply, if we need to talk to a Greek member of the European Parliament, we approach our Greek Armenian colleagues in Athens, be it in Thessaloniki or wherever they are, asking them to approach that certain member of the European Parliament. Or in the case of PACE, as you mentioned, we, especially in the January session where we had those two resolutions on Nagorno-Karabakh, we approached all our colleagues around Europe. So they approached their own members of the parliaments who are delegates to the PACE. And we coordinate all this effort together. And this is a federation based in Brussels, coordinating the work within Europe.
How many offices are we talking about generally within Europe? A network of how
many? We have our main office, of course, it's in Brussels. And we have, as of now, 14 different Armenian national committees within Europe. And lately we have also organizing new committees within Europe to, of course, multiply and do a more diverse work within Europe.
So to be able to collaborate with such organizations as the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of NATO, what's the status that your federation needs to have officially?
Well, we are an officially registered Armenian organization, or an organization with Armenian interests. And we do our work very openly. We are registered in the European Parliament registry, so there's nothing to hide about that. Anyone can see that. And of course, you have to be clear of your objectives and what you want to do. And in that scope, we do all this work. And since we are a registered organization, political organization, we have the capacity and the ability to register officially and be in and out of the parliaments and the sessions, and be it in Strasbourg or in Brussels. So,
and as far as lobbying goes, do you have a lot of counter lobbying from Azerbaijan or Turkey? Is this what level is that at, and does that really hinder in your work? What are the obstacles that you usually have to deal with?
Well, I wouldn't say Azerbaijan or Turkey. I would say Azerbaijan and Turkey. They work, I mean, you cannot separate these two allies themselves against us, because we see this, we feel this every day in Brussels or in Strasbourg or in these international organizations. Hand in hand, they work as one organization or state or entity, I must say. We counter them, of course, and I can openly say that in the last 4 or 5 years, we have been, or we have managed to make some big steps forward, and they have become reactive to our actions. And I can give many examples. And for example, or one example, In 2013, in October, we had the third European Armenian Convention, where one of the official guests was Nagorno-Karabakh Republic, Artsakh President Mr. Bako Sahakian. And he was the first head of state of a non-recognized republic, Artsakh, for example, in the European Parliament. He gave his speech in the opening session. We had members of the European Parliament next to him, with him, on the same panel. At the reception, and of course we had taken this action, and there were some reaction from the opposite side, of course, as you can understand. But nevertheless, that will be. But we are doing our job without any
What was the reaction, for example, in this case? Rallies?
No, not rallies. Not rallies. For example, the Azerbaijan embassy had tried, or we know that they had tried to call every single member of European Parliament's office, saying that there is this separatist state, head of state or representative, or however they were introducing him,
urging them
not to meet, not to receive him, not to attend the sessions, but of course that didn't work. So this is one little example. So I can name many more in different fields and places. So yeah.
Well, the couple of delegations from Nagorno-Karabakh arrived in Brussels very recently. Bako Sahakian, the human rights defender, as well, and you organized this. How is it easy to convince high-ranking officials in Europe, in Brussels, to receive representatives of a government they don't recognize? What goes into organizing such trips and meetings?
Yeah. Yes, last June, less than a month ago, we had two delegations from Nagorno-Karabakh. The first delegation was the president's delegation, 8-member delegation, members of the parliament of Nagorno-Karabakh, the foreign minister himself, Mr. Mirzoyan, and some other delegates with the president. And later on, we had the ombudsman of Nagorno-Karabakh Republic, Mr. Ruben Melikian. It's not easy organizing such meetings for such states, but it's not difficult either. It's not difficult because you have to know how and what you will be saying to your friends or colleagues or those European institutions. Because nevertheless, even though the state or Artsakh is not recognized, it doesn't mean that these people don't have the right to integrate, to communicate, or to come out of that state that some want them to be in, to come out of Artsakh, fly from Stepanakert and talk to their European counterparts, even though they are not recognized officials, yes. Officially recognized. So they can just introduce to their European counterparts about the April Azerbaijan aggression against Nagorno-Karabakh. The human rights defender had a very high number of quality meetings with members of the European Parliament. His counterpart in Belgium, in the regional, the Wallon and the Flemish counterparts in Belgium, with some civil society organizations. He met them. He talked and he represented what Artsakh is, what the human rights situation in Artsakh is, and of course, as you know, there is this interim report on the war crimes of Azerbaijan against Nagorno-Karabakh. He represented this and he gave this interim reports to those who were concerned. So in this sense, we work in Europe, in those circles in the European Union, to promote and to advocate for the rights of the Artsakh people and their right to existence, and of course their right to self-determination. And finally, all these are ways and means to the final goal, which is the self-determination or even independence for Artsakh. So we do this quite often, and I must say that Nagorno-Karabakh, the agenda, is our top priority these days for us in Europe.
Naturally. And you also organize trips of European delegates, not only to Armenia, but also to Nagorno-Karabakh. This should be more problematic given that Azerbaijan has the habit of blacklisting these officials, creating problems. How are they? Are these delegates ready to come? Is it problematic? Does it take a lot of convincing at times?
Well, it seems they come. This is what it shows. They're being there in Nagorno-Karabakh, and of course, the longer that blacklist is or persona non grata list is, of course, the better for us. But on the other hand, getting into serious matters, that if both the Karabakhis and Europeans, if they don't work with each other, they don't see with their own eyes what Karabakh is or what Europe is, how would they manage to communicate? How would they be able to pass the message? It's not only that Karabakh is not represented in the negotiation process. That's one thing. But on the other hand, they should be able to go out. Go out meaning come out of Stepanakert, of Nagorno-Karabakh, and visit Europe, and not only Europe, of course, all around the world, to represent the issues as they are, as they should be represented from first-hand encounters. So this goes for our European colleagues and counterparts as well. So if they do not go to Stepanakert, they do not visit Artsakh, they wouldn't know what the reality on the ground is. For example, people were impressed in Brussels, in Belgium, with the visit of Nagorno-Karabakh's president and the delegation that, okay, you had war almost a month ago, and now with you, 8-member delegation, you are in Brussels. So this means that Nagorno-Karabakh is an established state with its institutions, that it can afford, I may say, the president, the foreign minister and delegation to be outside of Artsakh, and the state would go on working, functioning properly. So all these little things matter. And in coming to Artsakh and these visits, when the Ombudsman, Mr. Melikian, was meeting his counterparts and some other members of the European Parliament or politicians, diplomats, they were surprised that Artsakh has an ombudsman, first of all, and second, that they really do make efforts in enforcing the rule of law and the human rights, because Mr. Melikian was referring to all the problems of internal Nagorno-Karabakh plus the war crimes against Azerbaijan. So it's a big field. So these things matter, because human rights, after all, is every human's right to exist and to life and to travel. So in that sense, we try to make these delegations and visits in both ways, as much as possible, of course, yes.
And one last question. What's the general perception of the situation in Nagorno-Karabakh in Europe? Officially speaking or socially speaking, the people, do they have enough understanding of what's going on? Has there been a change in this understanding in recent years, especially after the April escalations?
Well, things changed dramatically during the 4-day battles or war, as we call it, because the war has not finished yet, and still, hopefully, it will end soon. But nevertheless, that 4-day changed a lot the perception of politicians, diplomats, the European circles generally, and within the society. So these people saw two things, first of all, that the conflict is not a frozen, that it can become
ignite
any moment, and second of all, Azerbaijan is aggressive, and they commit war crimes. So this is, they know now. They saw it, they know it. But there should be more educating on this matter as to what really the roots of the conflict are, and not only generalizations. So in this sense, also visits do help quite a lot. Both visits, from Stepanakert to Brussels, both ways they help. We can see this perception as this understanding, this change in perception, change in the mentality. And I must also say that during the visit of the president, of Mr. Sahakian, he had interviews in the written press, the radio, TV stations. So there was quite a lot of explanations or educating on what the real matters are in regard to Artsakh and what they really want in Stepanakert. And of course, we will continue working in this direction, educating the Europeans, or educating more the Europeans and advocating for the rights of the Artsakhi people.
Well, I said that was my last question, but I have one more. Coming back to the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, currently we know that the presiding president is very pro-Azerbaijani. There's a history. Do you think this is going to have a lot of effect in any discussions or resolutions that might pass regarding Nagorno-Karabakh or Armenia? Since we're dealing with an apparently biased authority.
Well, probably it could. We saw this in January, or even before that, he paid his first official visit to Baku, to Azerbaijan. So that might say something. And our Armenian community in Spain, specifically in Valencia, they had a protest against him. But I'm sure he is more cautious. He should be more cautious. And this is something that not only us Armenians are saying. There is huge open sources literature against Pedro Agramunt of his caviar diplomacy and his or being under the influence of Azerbaijan in I don't know in how many ways. So there are these things as well. Do they count? Yes, they count. But are they as effective as being the president trying to promote these issues? I wouldn't say so. And I am sure that the Armenian delegation of the Republic of Armenia, the National Assembly delegation, I'm sure that they are aware of this reality. And I know that the Armenian head of the Armenian delegation, Mrs. Nagdalian, she had a face-to-face meeting with Pedro Agramunt. And I'm sure that many issues were discussed in that meeting. It was a closed meeting. Of course, I cannot know the proceedings or the subjects. But I'm sure that, and especially I want to believe that the January session of the PACE with both the resolutions is a big lesson to us Armenians generally, as a federation working on these matters, and specifically to the Armenian delegation in the PACE. I'm sure that we have learned our lessons, and we will be much more cautious in the.
What should have been done differently, looking back?
We've said this before, and I have no problem in repeating them here or retelling the story. We should have had that, or by we, I'm saying the National Assembly. We should have had, or the Assembly should have had that scientific approach to especially the Sarsank Reservoir resolution. We as Federation, we had prepared a dossier, a file, mentioning the specifics or the defaults of the Markovich report and how we could work against the resolution in Sarsank. So if more attention was directed to that resolution, some suggestions that we made, maybe we could have had a better outcome.
Because it was a very narrow, the vote was very narrow. I mean,
there were two votes. Yeah, we could have, my personal belief is that we could have managed to win both resolutions, but anyway, so that should be a very good, strong lesson. And I'm sure that they have themselves analyzed it, and I'm sure that such cases will not be repeated. But we should have been more careful in this international fora. We should not let things to chance. We should be very careful and follow things very closely. And because you never know, anything, anytime, anything can happen. And we shouldn't be, and specifically that I want to mention that we should not be running when things pass the committee and go to the plenary session, because then it's too difficult. It needs too much work to try to settle things down. And we should have been much more careful when things were being discussed or within the committees, the respective committees. So I'm sure that the National Assembly or the delegation and those responsible, I'm sure that they have learned.
Note of the situation.
We should. I mean, in this work that we do in activism, advocacy, lobbying, yes, we have the success. We should strongly focus on the success and how we succeeded in these issues, but a bigger lesson should be our failures, and we should really learn from our failures, so not to repeat them. And I'm sure that we are in that, we're taking on that path, yes.
Thank you very much for being here, and we thank the viewers for joining us as well.